This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Emily Rogers, and I wanted to share it on the channel. It happened only 2 years ago in our town. There was this one house that had been abandoned for, I think, about 2 decades. It was an older place, hidden deep among the trees. After no one bought it, people just forgot it existed. Over time, the woods slowly swallowed it up, and it was left to rot. I've always been fascinated by these kinds of places and loved exploring them. One random afternoon, when I had the day off work, I decided to finally check it out. I packed a small backpack, grabbed my flashlight, and walked there. Usually I explored with friends, but this house was so close by and seemed less significant than other places we'd been to, so I didn't bother inviting anyone. The driveway leading into the woods was almost gone, covered in grass and weeds. I pushed through until I could barely see the gravel anymore. As I walked deeper, I took out my flashlight. The house was farther into the woods than I remembered. It took me about 5 or 6 minutes of walking before I finally saw it. It was an old wooden home, probably built before garages were common. It looked like a large 2-story cabin. I approached one of the front windows, which was shattered, and leaned my head through it, listening carefully. For about 30 seconds, I stayed silent, trying to make sure I was alone. After hearing nothing, I went to the front door. The door was unlocked and already slightly open, so I pushed it wide and stepped inside. The interior was disturbingly decayed. Dust hung in the air. Furniture and personal belongings were still scattered around, remnants of whoever had lived there all those years ago. The living room had an old sofa, torn apart and covered in dust. Picture frames had fallen from the walls, their glass shattered across the floor. I explored the first floor, curious about what stories this place might hold. It wasn't very large, and after a few minutes, I climbed the creaky staircase to the second floor. I was surprised the stairs didn't collapse under my weight. The second floor had a narrow hallway with 2 rooms. One door was open, the other closed. I looked into the open room first. It was completely empty, which felt oddly unsettling compared to the cluttered downstairs. I stepped inside and swept my flashlight around, then froze. A sudden thud echoed from below me. My heart started racing. It didn't sound like a natural creak from the old wood. It sounded deliberate. I hurried down the stairs, sweeping my flashlight back and forth. The house was dead silent, and nothing seemed to be moving. That gut feeling hit me hard. I needed to leave. My friends and I always had one rule when exploring abandoned places. If something feels wrong, get out immediately. Being alone made it worse. I headed quickly toward the front of the house, my flashlight cutting through the dark. But when I reached the front door, I froze. The door was shut. I knew for a fact I had left it wide open. I grabbed the handle and yanked, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked, bolted from the outside. Panic flooded my chest. Someone was here. Someone had locked me in. Without hesitation, I ran to the broken window, climbed through, and jumped out. I didn't see anyone, but I wasn't taking any chances. I sprinted into the woods, turned off my flashlight, and cut through the trees instead of following the path. My pulse was pounding, every sound around me amplified by fear. Then I saw lights ahead, red and blue flickering through the trees. Confused, I hid behind a tree and peered out. 2 police cars were driving slowly down the overgrown driveway toward the house. They pushed through the grass and came to a stop in front. I stayed hidden, watching. Something deep inside me knew they weren't there for me. In the following weeks, I tried to find out what happened that day, why the police were there, who else had been inside that house. But nothing was ever released publicly. No reports, no updates, no mention of it anywhere. Whatever was happening in that house, whoever was there that day, it must have been something terrible. And sometimes I still think about how close I came to finding out. Thank you to Emily Rogers for sending this terrifying story. If you have a story, send it in, and it might be featured next. This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Megan Carter, and I wanted to share it on the channel. It was nearly 5 years ago when this happened. I was still in high school, and my best friend at the time was a guy named Colton. We hung out almost every day after school, always finding random places to go or things to do. This took place right after school let out for winter break. We had nothing but free time and absolutely no plans. We spent most of the day at his house playing Xbox, but eventually we got bored. We wanted to get outside and do something different. Our town was small, and everyone knew about the creepy old church that sat at the end of a deserted road. It had been abandoned for as long as anyone could remember. When I was a kid, I was terrified of it. But as I got older, my curiosity started to replace that fear. So when Colton and I were walking around the edge of town that night and past the road leading to the church, we decided to check it out, just to see what it looked like after all these years. It was already dark, but the moon was bright enough to see by. We both had our phones in case we needed flashlights. The road itself was in terrible shape, cracked and split with vines and bushes creeping through the pavement. By the time we reached the end, the road behind us had completely disappeared into the darkness. The church was much creepier than I remembered. It looked like the forest had swallowed it. Even the old iron fence around the courtyard was nearly invisible beneath thick, tangled plants. We found a broken section and slipped through. Everything was silent. No lights, no movement, no sound except our footsteps crunching against the overgrown path. When we reached the massive entrance door, Colton pushed it open. The sound was horrible, a deep, dragging creak that echoed through the entire building. We both froze in the doorway for a moment, shining our lights across the interior. Rows of wooden pews stretched toward the front, and what struck me most was how untouched everything looked. No graffiti, no broken glass, no trash, nothing. It was as if time had just stopped inside. I stepped in first, with Colton following behind. Each of our footsteps echoed up to the high vaulted ceiling. We were halfway down the aisle when a sudden thud echoed through the church. It was loud enough to make both of us jump. We quickly turned on our phone flashlights, scanning the room, but saw nothing. Colton guessed maybe something had fallen over in another room near the entrance. Trying to play it cool, we decided to keep exploring. I walked all the way up to the podium at the front and turned to look back down the aisle. The far end near the entrance was swallowed in darkness. Our light beams couldn't even reach that far. After a moment, Colton suggested checking out the side room he had noticed earlier. We crossed over to the wall where there was a closed door. I pulled it open and shined my light inside. It looked like a storage area. Stacks of chairs and old boxes everywhere. We walked in quietly, looking around. That's when we heard it. A soft thump. Then another. We froze. The sound was faint but clear. Slow footsteps moving down the main aisle of the church. It was coming from the front near the podium, heading toward the entrance. Colton and I looked through the narrow crack in the door, our flashlights off now. In the darkness beyond, something moved. For just a split second, we saw a shadowed figure walk down the aisle and out through the front entrance door. Then the footsteps stopped. We listened, our hearts pounding, until we heard the door creak shut. We looked at each other in disbelief. Neither of us could speak. We didn't know if we should hide or run, but after what felt like forever, we decided to make a break for it. We sprinted out of the storage room, through the main hall, and out the front doors. We didn't stop running until we were back at the main road, gasping for breath. To this day, I don't know who or what that was. The only thing that really scares me is the thought that when I was standing near the podium earlier, whatever it was must have already been there, just a few feet away, watching me. This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Daniel Morse, and I wanted to share it on the channel. It was 2016. I lived with my two best friends, who all called Jason and Andrew for privacy. We were all roommates in an apartment in the city, finishing up our last year of college. Since we were juggling both school and jobs, free time was rare. But when we did get some, we usually spent it hiking or just exploring random places. Sometimes we'd drive out to new towns, wander around, or find trails we hadn't tried before. That week, all three of us had Friday and Saturday off, so we wanted to do something fun on Friday night. Andrew mentioned that a friend had told him about an old decommissioned factory on the outskirts of the city. It sounded eerie but intriguing. None of us had explored a place like that before, and after a bit of hesitation, we just said, "Screw it, let's go." We hopped into Jason's car and drove toward the edge of the city. Living in the Midwest, you can see where the city ends and the flat land stretches endlessly in every direction. That's where the factory was supposed to be. We didn't have an exact address, if it even had one, but we managed to find it on Google Maps using satellite view. We parked at a nearby gas station about a block away and walked the rest of the distance. The whole area felt abandoned. No cars, no people, just silence. The factory was enormous, much bigger than we expected, covered in graffiti and surrounded by rusted railings. A tall, chain-link fence with barbed wire circled the property, but several sections had been cut open, clearly by others who had snuck in before us. We slipped through one of those gaps and made our way to a large metal door at the front, which was already slightly open. The moment we stepped inside, a chill ran through me. The entire structure groaned as the wind pushed against it, and the metal walls creaked with a deep, unsettling sound. All the lights were off, of course, so we relied on a few cheap flashlights Andrew had brought. The main room was massive, filled with rusted machinery and narrow walkways between them. We wandered around, staying relatively close to each other. Eventually, I drifted toward the far end of the room and found a hallway. Before going in, I turned around and saw one of my friends standing a short distance away near one of the machines. I couldn't tell if it was Jason or Andrew in the dark, but I assumed they saw me, so I kept going. The hallway led to another heavy metal door. I pushed it open and stepped into another room filled with more industrial equipment. There was an old conveyor belt in the middle and a catwalk lining the ceiling above with a ladder hanging down at the far end. Just as I was shining my flashlight around, I heard the door behind me open and close. I turned and called out, "Andrew, Jason?" expecting to see one of them, but when my flashlight hit the doorway, no one was there. The door stood closed, the hallway empty. My stomach dropped. I called their names again, my voice echoing through the metal walls, but there was no reply. As I took a cautious step back toward the door, I heard something behind me, a faint sound like gravel or small debris shifting across the floor. I spun around and froze. Standing about 6 or 7 feet away was a man. He looked filthy, with long, greasy hair, a tangled beard, and glassy, unfocused eyes. For a split second, we just stared at each other. Then he lunged straight at me, sprinting like a wild animal. I stumbled backward, slamming the door shut between us, just in time, then turned and bolted down the hallway. My flashlight shook in my hand as I ran, and that's when I heard Jason and Andrew calling out for me from the main room. I shouted for them to leave and burst through the doorway, yelling, "Go, go, go!" We ran as fast as we could out of the factory, across the overgrown lot, and back through the cut fence. We didn't stop until we reached the car. My chest was burning, and I could barely get the words out as I told them what happened. Whoever that man was, he had been hiding in that abandoned factory, waiting for someone to wander off alone. I don't know what he wanted, and I'm honestly lucky I never found out. Since that night, we've never gone exploring abandoned places again. Some things are better left undiscovered.